Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining this webinar. We're here with Ivan and Katharina. So this webinar about AI-assisted literature reviews, how AI and experts can really work together. So it's plays a real pleasure to organize this webinar between MedBoard and Katylistic. Of course, Katharina is here to bring the expert perspective as an expert and with a lot of expertise in literature review process in her career. And Ivan, ourselves, we are here with MedBoard bringing in our perspective and, of course, our experience in using and helping manufacturers with the introducing and implementing AI and technology during the process. So very happy to have you all here. And of course, I'm going to leave the floor to Ivan and Katharina to also give you an overview of the agenda today and what we will cover. So yeah, thank you again for joining.
Thank you so much, Antonella, for the introduction. So we're going to go with first of all, thank you so much, Katharina, for doing this webinar with us. So the agenda we created, welcome, Katharina. The agenda that we have created for this session, so it consists of 6 points. So we're going to cover what is a systematic literature reviews, obviously the AI and automations introduction, especially talking more about the technology and what it can do, cannot do, and then going deeper into workflows and how the experts and AI and automations can work together. Then Katharina is going to share with all of us what are the do's and don'ts for her in terms of that using AI, especially with these literature reviews. And then we're going to have a session with live demo examples as well with MedBoard. So then Katharina can share as well in terms of like what are the specific actions or specific use cases that you use most and what you think is adding as well a lot of value. So first, I would like to obviously we will have a Q&A at the end. I would like to say welcome to Katharina. So for those that they don't know you, maybe you can introduce yourself, for everybody.
Yeah, sure. First of all, thanks for having me here. Very happy to join another webinar with you guys. So my name is Katharina. I work as a regulatory writing consultant. I'm based in Basel in Switzerland. And most of my projects are somehow related to clinical evaluations and post-market surveillance and PMCF projects. And of course, literature reviews and especially systematic literature reviews are part of my daily work. And that's why I also use MedBoard on a daily basis. And I'm really happy to discuss the topic about AI versus experts in systematic literature reviews with you today.
Thank you so much, Katharina, for the introduction. And that's exactly the topic, right? Is understanding what is the realistic approach and what actually AI can do for you. For those that they don't know about MedBoard, I know about myself. So I'm the CEO and founder. I work in regulatory for the last more than 15 years now. And I work in from many different type of tasks, literature as well, of course, regulatory, but as well with multiple jurisdictions. And as well as Antonella here, that is the person as well leading with a lot of different customers and helping to implement all those processes. So the three of us, we hope to give you a very good overview of what we see that is being used and how it can be used and how it can take advantage as well, the teams, from these technologies. So I think we're going to start with some basics, right, Katharina? So in terms of when and why, right?
Right. So to get started, I just wanted to show a few of the main use cases for systematic literature reviews. So of course, always more from a medical device perspective, because I usually just work with medical devices. So of course, SLRs are the foundation for the clinical evaluation. You also usually do periodic literature reviews for post-market surveillance and post-market clinical follow-up purposes. I also use systematic literature reviews a lot for study protocols. So on the one hand, to get all the information that I need for the sample size calculation, but also to identify the most relevant endpoints and also ways how to actually measure these endpoints. That's what you also get from an SLR. Also during product development, during the different phases. So this already could be a very comprehensive state-of-the-art evaluation at the early beginning of the product development, but also maybe a specific search for any usability or any technical topics. And of course, there are much more other cases. And I think independent of your use case, the systematic literature review always has the advantage that it gives you a structured and more or less unbiased overview of all the evidence that is available. And therefore, it's a very great foundation for decision making. I also always highlight that a good systematic literature review can also be the source of truth for cross-functional teams. So when we take, for example, the state-of-the-art evaluation, you have people from clinical affairs, of course, that rely on that, but also the people from usability or engineering. So different teams can make use of such a document. And in the end, it always strengthens your regulatory decisions and also, of course, the regulatory submissions. So I think we could come up with more benefits, but for me, these are the mains that I wanted to share here.
Right. So it can be used for many use cases, and it provides obviously a high relevant, type of evidence as well for any of those processes, from earlier stages to obviously to the later stages, or just to be when products are on the market. So we want to go straight to the point, right? So in terms of the challenges, what are the main challenges to do all of this work for literature systematic reviews? And as well, because it's more required these days than what it was if I look myself in my professional career 10, 15 years ago. So it just become much more required, especially for manufacturers, especially, for, high level of evaluations for products, right? So what we see is two main challenges are really here. So the first one is the manual work. No one wants to do this high level in terms of required task in a manual way as well, especially when they are very repetitive, or it takes a lot of energy in terms of repetitive tasks, but as well extracting the information continuously. And the second challenge is to have those steps or processes isolated or disconnected, because then someone has to do the transfer of that data manually, right? So again, it's all about how we can empower those professionals to do obviously these systematic reviews, much faster, but just with much more control, because those are the required evidence, for authorities and for obviously many evaluations, including for evaluations in terms of economic value as well for those solutions. So what we're gonna go into right now is just directly into the AI automations, right? So I always like to start with when we talk about AI automations, what can we achieve with the AI automations? And a lot of people jumped into AI for everything, right? And this is one of the key things that we want to emphasize in here, that when we talk about automation, means that the use of software to perform tasks without human intervention. So it means that there is no intervention from an expert from one task to another as well, in terms of the execution. So the first thing that we want to emphasize, obviously, to apply automations, you need to have data quality, and you need to have a clear and structured data. That's the first thing that you need to have. Second, you can do a lot of automations with data engineering and data science. So when you create, for example, a Prisma or duplication, or you can actually get a lot of value from different type of automations. And then on top, then we have the AI automation that we look into other technologies as machine learning, Gen AI, and so on. But one of the key things as well, everybody has to look into every step is, am I using the right technology for the problem I'm trying to solve? Not to select the technology and try to use that for everything. So this pyramid is very useful to understand that you don't need AI for every step, but we will show what are the best steps, or what is the best technology for those steps. The second thing I would like to highlight as well, that because there are many types of automations that you can do with or without AI, there are differences as well in terms of what you can achieve. And especially in the environments that, Katharina, MedBoard operates, with manufacturers, with authorities and so on, we need to ensure that the information is robust, is accurate, and is validated. And this is super important because we are not doing a student work for a high school and so we are actually ensuring that the devices or the products or the medicines are effective, are performing safely, and obviously there are no adverse events related to that as well. So I like to emphasize as well that you can have a lot of automation with the classic automation with the output nature of software engineering. For a specific action that you do A, you get B. So this is very obvious for many of you because obviously this is a highly adopted technology. You can do obviously a lot of with machine learning as well. That the models they produce deterministic outputs, right? So given an input, you will have an output that you can validate, or there are some certain validations that is going to be with a certain range. So then you have certain parameters that you can validate as well. And they are more handling structured, numeric, and categorical data. And then on the third column, what we see is Gen AI LLMs, that this is what is becoming now more mainstream, that those models are primarily trained on predicting the next token for a text, right? And the big difference between all of these two and the LLMs are the LLMs are stochastic, right? So as well, they are probabilistic models. I always like, and they work as well in an open context, like you can use LLMs if they're in a specific context and you have more probabilities as well to reduce, obviously, the variation. But some of the decision making, especially in regulatory and clinical, are very open context where a lot of different type of inputs are required. So, and all of this, the human judgment and perception are required. So it's very important to understand the different technologies that we can use, because obviously we can apply them, and we can apply as well what are the safeguards that we can put for those inputs, in order to validate ourselves the answers. The second thing, or the third thing, is this is the classic question that we get. And I got this as well for many, many years, right? So what people think, especially probably the ones that they are less familiar with these highly regulated environments for software literature, for literature reviews, are that some people think that you can have a very complex process as is the systematic literature review, completed end to end with one click. And then magically, you have your CR and it's all completed. Obviously, we are far from that reality. And the other thing as well in our case is we need to show how those steps being executed and being able to provide audit trail, all the steps and the decisions along this process, right? So obviously, everybody wants this magic, but we need to be realistic as well in terms of what we can offer and as well how we can work with these technologies, but at the same time have a compliant process that fulfills the needs of the manufacturers, of the authorities, and eventually as well, to the patients, because we are due to obviously perform the best processes, robust processes to produce the best evidence. So this is the introduction about the automations. And now, obviously, Katharina is going to give the perspective of what actually is, a systematic review.
Yeah, right. So I think, as you can already guess from this flowchart, it's quite difficult to just have one click and then you have all the outputs that you need for your clinical evaluation. So, of course, the SLR is a workflow. It's also a process. So you don't only have these standalone tasks. They also are connected with each other. And I mean, usually you just start with a research question to just define the scope of your work. After that, you define your search strategy, including all the different search terms, the databases that you want to use, the time frame you want to consider. Also, then you, of course, perform the search in different databases. You end up with your number of results, and then you start the screening. And usually you start with the title and abstract screening, then go to the full text articles. And then, of course, after that, according to the elements that you already defined in your protocol, you start with the data extraction, depending on what kind of information you want to retrieve. And of course, you also have to do a more or less objective appraisal that you define in advance in your literature search protocol. And then in the end, you have to summarize and analyze all the information, and you end up with a report. And so, of course, you have all these different steps. Of course, there is still some manual work included, I would say. But the big question is, where can we use automation and where can we use AI? And in the following slides, I want to share you some of the main steps of the SLR workflow. And I always want to highlight where you still need expert knowledge and where AI or automation can help you. And of course, in the end, we will also show you this in the demo in MedBoard, how you can apply all these features.
So the question,
yeah, sorry.
Katharina, sorry to. So the first question that you emphasized before is you need a defined process, right? So this is, you need a deterministic process that is always consistently producing the same steps, right? So that's the first thing that everybody needs to know as well.
Yeah, correct. So that's something that only you can define. So AI can maybe give you some input, but you have to define a workflow that works for you, that also aligns with your requirements and also with the regulatory requirements, of course.
And if we go step by step, so could you give us, from step by step, where the expert knowledge is required? And, I can help as well from the automation and AI, while we see that it can be very helpful as well.
Yeah. So, I mean, at least from my perspective, of course, expert knowledge is always required to define the definite research question and the whole strategy. Of course, AI can give you some input about search terms, but in the end, you are responsible to define the right search strings. Also for the PICO framework, so you have to make yourself familiar with the topic and you have to know, okay, these are the relevant outputs that I want to get in the end, and they have to be included in my search strategies. So all the definite search strings with all the filters and the search periods, these are usually done by experts. And of course, also you are responsible to define inclusion and exclusion criteria and the appropriate appraisal criteria. So that's actually everything you have in your literature search plan at the very beginning of the process.
And that's a very important step, right? Because how you approach your literature search or your literature review it can change totally the output. And as the saying says, the intelligence is always in the question, right? So this is where the expert needs to actually have a very well thought plan, how actually this is going to work and how going to meet the goal that I need to meet, right?
Yeah, right.
So in terms of the automation, so obviously from this side or from the automation and AI, so obviously it can help to research topics, to have inputs for the search strings, suggestions for the PICO framework, helping to identify endpoints as well, obviously to implement searches and appraisal. And after all this information is implemented by the expert, this can be put in digital formats, in different type of frameworks. So then it can be used in the future, right? So in this side, I would say the AI automation, especially, they are helping more to put in a framework the information and helping with inputs, to the expert. For the expert has a heavy role in terms of like how it's going to approach the question, right?
Yeah, that's true. But I think it's a very nice starting point. So I recently had this situation that I wanted to define the search strings for an SLR, but for some reason I always realized, okay, these are actually not the results I was looking for. And actually, the inputs from the AI assistant gave me the search terms that for some reason, I missed. And this helped me to define or identify the most relevant publications. And then I could adapt my search strategy. So it's definitely helpful input. And I always recommend to consider it.
Yeah, especially looking for synonyms, to look for endpoints,
right.
and maybe, you never thought about it. So obviously by searching in similar trials, similar articles as well, if that can be retrieved easily, that can provide us an input. But again, you will have the final word whether to include that on how to approach it, right? So
that's right.
As always. So if we move to the screen and full text review, so how you combine the knowledge with the automations?
Yeah. So Of course, the final decisions on inclusion and exclusion always come from the expert. But what I really like are the suggestions for inclusion, exclusion. I think we will also show this in the demo later on. So after a few inclusion and exclusion decisions that you have to make, then MedBoard gives you some suggestions on, or provides suggestions for inclusion and exclusion. And especially in combination with the keyword highlights, I think it makes especially the title and abstract screening much faster. So I like this feature really a lot. Of course, also for the Pico extraction, I think it's much more faster when you already get the data extraction from the AI assistant, and then you just have to double check, okay, is this really correct? Do I have to add or adapt something? And it's very easy because all the information is usually highlighted in color. So you can just go to the respective section in the abstract or in the full text and verify if it's correct or not. But in the end, of course, the expert is the person who provides the context, so who also has an oversight, gets the whole picture, and makes in the end final conclusions, especially in the screening of the full text then. But of course, from the AI side, you can use the AI assistant to have this Q&A function. So what I often use is that I ask the assistant, okay, is there information about brand names? Are there any limitations to the study? And this also makes the reviewing process much faster. And of course, things where you don't need AI for, but where you can use automation are all these things related to flowcharts, table creations, summaries without any interpretation. And that's also very helpful and makes the process much faster.
Now, many times, many people said, actually, what is saving me a lot of time is not actually that AI or that function. It's actually having these automated tasks that they just do all this grouping together, all the book update, all the duplicates. And that's where a lot of those, they feel a lot of value in those automations, right? So it's really like we have in the pyramid layer, so a lot of those automations. So if we have the top, but we don't have the lower layer, still a lot of people will need to do a lot of manual tasks, right? And this is what we need to understand as well. Like there are different levels of automation. So in terms of the instructing and reporting, so how you approach the expert knowledge and the automations?
Yeah, I think it's already quite similar to what we shared in the previous slide. So of course, you can use all these features to extract information about different outcomes, performance and safety. You can also use it to create summaries that you can then copy, for example, to your clinical evaluation. But of course, you always have to verify if the information is correct. And especially from the perspective of the appraisal, of course, you need some expert knowledge to really say, okay, what are the real limitations of the study? Is this a publication that is helpful for my clinical evaluation or not? And of course, you need to understand and make yourself familiar with all the information because you are the one to make regulatory decisions, or you have to decide, okay, I have sufficient clinical evidence in my clinical evaluation, or I have some gaps and I need to close them. So that's something that you can only do. And of course, you can just use the assistant to extract information, make the process a bit faster, and take over for some of the manual and repetitive work.
So if I'm reading you correctly, so within a specific like robust process, what you're using a lot of automation is to accelerate the process that you already were doing, right? So because you do this for a living in terms of like supporting a lot of like customers and manufacturers. So you use them as a more like an extension of yourself to accelerate those processes, or to get more information as well that can help to that specific process.
Yeah, correct. So I think it really makes the process much more faster when you already have an extraction of the information and you only have to check, is it correct? Is there something missing? Do I have to add something? Or you are the one who have to copy all the information from the publication to a table.
Right. And then this links very much with the next slide, right? So you put some examples as well, like extraction and so on, because you always check, you validate, because everything has to align with, how you're approaching the context, and your regulatory decision.
Yeah.
So could you give us a bit of like, what is the process here as well?
Yeah, so I included these two examples. So there's another one on the next slide to also highlight how important the context and the amount of information is. So I used here the example or the tool for the AI Pico extraction. And this example was only the information that it got from an abstract. So it was at the first screening process where I only do the title and abstract screening. And at this step, I often use the Pico extraction, especially when you have very lengthy abstracts. Then you get all the relevant information relatively fast, and then you can decide whether a publication is relevant or not. So on the left side, you have all the information about population, intervention, comparator, and outcome according to the AI assistant. And then, as I just mentioned before, it's always highlighted in color. So I go to the abstract, check if it's correct. And actually, in this case, since the information only came from the abstract, I had to make some make some adjustments for the comparator, because the abstract actually mentioned, in this case, additional fusion as a potential comparator to the treatment that was described in the abstract. But it was only background information. So actually the study was a single arm study. So there was no actual comparator. So I had to make this adjustment. And I think that highlights quite nice that it's always important to double check the results. And then on the other slide, I did the same with a full text article. And here you see, of course, you have much more information just from the whole article. And then actually I also double check the information, but everything that was mentioned in the Pico table was also correct.
So do you, every time you have, especially with Gen AI and so on, you always validate the answer that aligns with, your specific goals, right?
Right, correct.
And what you are sharing as well, like when there is a limited data in terms of the context that is provided, obviously the AI is going to work with the data that is available.
Right.
So it may not understand the full picture or even information about the product, because you've been working on that product before. So obviously that's a certain limitation that everybody needs to understand when working with AI, is what is the specific context or data that is using for those decisions.
Yeah, right.
So from next slide, what we wanted to give from our perspective, MedBoard, that we work a lot with these processes, is in terms of the automation and AI, some conclusions that we reach over the last years, especially with the software automation. So we like to separate what is coming from a defined process, deterministic outputs. Remember from the first slides. So more like a software or machine learning automation. So always the process needs to have a defined input and defined output, and does not require human intervention and can be validated. So this is the important thing for fully automation, right? And then you need to connect the steps and data and processes when you can, but you need to understand that not every single process can be digitized or automated, especially when are knowledge-based steps or highly judgment steps, as well, as Katharina was describing before. And obviously what is important when you have deterministic outputs is you can have a lot of reporting and KPIs. Now, on the other side, with the artificial intelligence like Gen AI, now talking more in that particular, our recommendation is always to use that as an input rather than a fully automation. Obviously, using enterprise-grade solutions. Why? Because then you can assure confidentiality and privacy. So, for example, our solution is like fully enterprise. Data doesn't go anywhere. Obviously, if you use any model that goes to a vendor or AI model and so on, those questions may have private confidential information. The outputs always needs to be verified by the user, especially with Gen AI, and we need to provide, especially more from our end, explainable AI. So what does it mean? That the user interface has to clearly give you where those inputs are taken, so you can verify and trust, that specific answer or those specific inputs. And there are different type of ways of doing this. So you have citations, highlighting references, and sources, and so on. One important thing, and this is something I emphasize through a lot of conferences I'm talking as well, is the AI doesn't know what is right and what is wrong. And specifically in these processes with literature reviews, regulatory processes, this is a very important matter. And the other thing is it doesn't understand your full intent and context, but the expert does. And this is so important because the AI may try, especially with Gen AI, to find the fastest way to do it. And this is kind of like the risk, for having this one click and everything is done. But you understand the ethics, the moral, and you understand what is right and what is wrong. And you put as well a very important question, Katharina, for this type of context about what is sufficient clinical data. So obviously, understanding, from an expert perspective, what is sufficient clinical data. And as we always say, it's not a magic wand, it's a tool. And what we see, the more expert the person is, the more professional, the better understands how a tool can be used in that case. And then from our side as well, we see maybe people are less familiar with these regulatory processes or literature reviews and so on, and they expect like SpongeBob, to get everything in one click, right? So I think that we need to be aware as well how to use these specific tools. And then we have before we go into more use cases, we have the essentials for automation and AI that Katharina want to share, and the do and don'ts related to the AI and automation.
Yeah, so we already briefly discussed it. So I think most of the features that made my life much easier are just automation and actually not AI. So for example, these continuous searches, especially when you have periodic searches for post-market surveillance activities. Of course, also the duplicate detection or the reporting. So the automated creation of the Prisma flowchart that gives you the right numbers without any errors that I usually had when I did it manually. And of course, also the outputs in an Excel sheet or a Word file, depending on what you need. And I also really like all the filtering and bulk actions. So when you want to filter for all the publications that were related to a different search term, for example. So that makes your life really easier. And of course, also some of the features that we already shared before. So the AI-supported suggestions for inclusion or exclusion, the PICO and the data extraction. I also really like this Q&A function. So especially when you have lengthy documents and it's not quite clear if the information that you're looking for is included in the text, you can use this in function to get the essentials from the publication. And of course, also all the data extraction and the creation of some nice summaries that you can then use for your clinical evaluation. So these are my main features in terms of automation and AI that I use in my daily work.
And from your expert perspective, what are the do and don'ts that you recommend, for everybody?
Yeah, so I always recommend AI, or in most cases also actually automation for all these repetitive tasks. So I hope that most of the people are not doing their screening in Excel or EndNote anymore. Of course, always validation of all outputs. So in the end, you are responsible for the correctness of your outputs. Also that you make sure that you have full traceability back to the source, because also this might be a topic in an audit where the reviewer might be interested in. I always use AI to accelerate the PICO extraction process and also the outcome extraction process and for the creation of summaries. But again, always make sure that I keep track of all my decisions and corrections that I make. And of course, always the combination of AI suggestions with my expert review and with me having the context and the whole picture. And this, immediately leads to the don'ts. So of course, we should not solely rely on AI suggestions, whether it's for inclusion or exclusion and also for the data extraction, because as you already explained, it always just works with the information that it has and maybe does not have the whole picture. And I would also not treat it as a replacement for critical thinking. In the end, we have to decide whether there's sufficient evidence, if we have to make changes or not. And that's why we also have to get a good understanding of all the evidence that we are screening in an SLR.
And when you talk about repetitive tasks, right, and accelerating, so I guess as well you are talking from the benefit on not only to accelerate and doing faster, but have to have less fatigue because I think like when you what any person has to extract from 10 articles and then 100, obviously it's not your brain is not same fresh as you are in article 1 that you are in 57, right?
That's true. Yeah, and I think after a while, when you do these repetitive tasks on your own, you somehow stop thinking about what you are doing. You just extract, but you don't really understand what you're doing. And I think with all these automation tasks or features that we have, you can spend more time in really understanding the data, also getting a feeling of the amount of data, the evidence that you have, and gives you more time to really think about the relevant things like regulatory decisions, for example.
So that's very interesting. So you feel like your brain is more focused on the evaluation and analysis rather than switching from extracting, looking for characters, copying and pasting, and then changing to evaluation. So your brain is more continuously on the evaluation mode.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing obviously the do's and don'ts. What we'd like to share now some examples, from the platform and so on, and then talk with Katharina, with Antonella about this, about the different functions as well. And at the end, we will have a Q&A as well for any questions. So Antonella as well is helping with any questions that any of you can have. So I'm gonna change screen. So I'm gonna remove the presentation, and we have already here prepare a literature review as an example. So we will go through that right now. So one of the key things, obviously, we are inside of one literature review in here. So here you have different type of literature reviews. We're going to use this for today. But before we go inside, what I wanted to show as well, like Katharina, like you mentioned before, is to get some insights in terms of like the search query, the endpoints, and so on. So obviously, in terms of the using assistants for AI, they are very useful as well to help to create different queries. Obviously, people have the last word. So, for example, we can put in our assistant to create a literature review search for that specific case, provide a PICO framework as well. So I guess this is very useful, as you said before, to brainstorming, right? So to understand if something was missed or something has to be added, if some considerations need to be taken. We take all of this from all the databases that we manage from clinical trials, literature, and so on. So obviously they provide specific sources and so on. So if we look into, for example, like create a PICO framework, you can provide that as well, and so on. So these are the type of brainstorming or inputs that you may use, right? Depending on how familiar you are with that technology or whether you want to expand more knowledge, right?
Yeah, exactly. So especially when I'm not already that familiar with a condition, then it's really nice because it already gives you some synonyms that you might not be aware of, and gives you really good input as a starting point.
Yes, and as I said before as well, it will give you different citations. So if you're looking for example, a specific citation, you can look into more detail about, for example, this nice guidance and so on. The other use case that we see a lot to be used is to understand endpoints, right? Again, this is going to read through a lot of clinical trials that are within our database in MedBoard and so on. So you can look for example, endpoints for negative pressure. I have here for chronic wounds. So again, it's like more brainstorming in terms of like getting that information and evaluating whether your primary endpoints aligned, not aligned, whether you need to do more research in specific clinical trials, right?
Yeah, correct. And I think that's super helpful because, of course, MedBoard, as you just mentioned, gets all the information from all these different databases. And when you're new to a topic, you might not be aware of all this information. So you start with your first publication, you extract the endpoints. And with this tool, you already get an overview of the potentially most relevant endpoints that you're looking for. And having this in mind, I think you're also a bit faster with the data extraction and with the final decisions on the right endpoints.
Right. And the last part that we wanted to as well to show that obviously regulatory requirements, understanding, what are the clinical evaluation requirements and so on. These are very well known in Europe, but of course you are from a different jurisdiction, or Australia, or Singapore, they have their own requirements, for this. So you can search for this. We have a search that you can search as well. That is specific information here. So you can put clinical evaluation, MDCG, for example, and then you can search for that specific update. So I'm just going to go there without waiting. So, and then you can just filter any information related to that. So we wanted to show you this to all of you because this is a nice use case to us AI, but as well is within the context of what the expert wants to achieve as well. Mm-hmm. So now we're going to move into the that specific literature reviews, and then go through the different functionalities, right? So you said as well that the screening, you like it because it just helps you to, so obviously this is learning from any 20 reviews, so and it's learning from your decisions, understanding what specific data was included, what specific data was not included, mm-hmm. and getting some predictions. Obviously, the more predictions or the more decisions you make, the more accurate it will be because it will learn more on that side, right? So then we have this histogram as well, so you can see the whole picture, but then it will give you different suggestions. And again, you can disagree on that, and then you can decide whether that's relevant or not relevant based on that. What you said, Katharina, is you actually, so if you go into any of these with pending, you use the PICO mm-hmm. to make those decisions, right? So you probably check the overview, the PICO values, and understand whether this is relevant to your case, so you can scan much faster, and then you can make that decision, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. Because in my literature search protocol, I already defined the PICO framework, so I already know what I'm looking for. And then I have these nice extraction also highlighted in color, and then I can just briefly check, okay, is this what I'm looking for or not? And this makes the title and abstract screening much faster in combination with the AI suggestion.
Right. So you would say, okay, this is relevant, and that will align, and then you go to the next one.
Yeah.
And again, we're talking about that fatigue. So extracting this takes, 2 seconds. So you have the information already in here. You move to the next one. You extract. Yeah. So you save all that time in extracting the information and highlighting that information as well, as you said. So you can just make those decisions based on those inputs. So in your automations AI, in terms of that benefits, do you consider this is something that is helping you a lot to accelerate the process while keeping in control, of course?
Yeah, right. Because I really like this highlighting function. It makes it so much easier to find the relevant information from the abstract, and also the AI suggestions are super helpful. It also you also realize that it learns on the go. So sometimes you might disagree, and then later on you see, okay, now it learned from my previous decisions, and now we're in line. And what I also sometimes do is that I just briefly check my not relevant hits with the AI suggestion just to see if there are any discrepancies. And then I might go mm-hmm. back to this article and see, okay, is it really not relevant, or maybe I missed something? And that's a really nice feature.
And then obviously we apply the PICO AI with the full text. Obviously mm-hmm. it's going to be able to produce much more information.
Yeah.
Just for everybody, obviously you have the researchers here. You can combine from PubMed, you can import as well from Cochrane, Embase, and any other file. We have a lot of different type of databases. And then obviously in terms of the custom questions, so you can use the typical MDR questions, or more like open in terms of limitation of the studies, same device, study design, and so on. So we created some kind of normal questions or usual questions that people get into. So combining some INDRF questions with other questions. Obviously for the AI, and something that we need to emphasize is context is very required. So in this case, we are saying this or device is the trauma and dressings and so we define this in here as part of the prompts and giving more context. Obviously, you can do this as well without the AI. So obviously, this is just to provide suggestions, but we're going to show you as well the advantages of having that in here. So as you can see here, I went already to the relevant items. So I'm going to pick, for example, this example, and then the extraction of the, again, the Pico. Now it takes from the full PDF. So you have all the full PDF. One of the things that you mentioned as well, Katharina, is the questions, the Q&A, right? To ask questions, to those. So you can ask, you mentioned before about limitations. So we can ask, what are the limitations for the study? Normally, if people have created this in the custom questions, these already are defined in here. The key advantages for explainable AI is if you click in one place, it takes you directly to that specific section. So again, that it helps you time to search in the PDF limitations, find the information is there, and say, okay, yeah, that's that's the information I'm looking for. You can look as well for specific, like looking for any risk of bias. Some examples that people do as well, benefit risk summary for the device. So again, it's just going to give you like some key points that are highlighted in the article. It's not going to give you obviously everything that or may do, but you will need to check as well, in terms of what is extracting, in terms of the benefits and the risk as well. It gives you the citations so you can check as well. And then, as you mentioned as well, you can as well look for what type of devices are included. So this is only the AI chat. I will show now in terms of the answering the questions that we already created. So now it's telling me that these are the questions, these are the specifics. So if I click here, it takes me directly to that device. I think that shortening that time is what it makes you less time in terms of the admin of thinking where to search and so on, and getting the information and having that evaluation mode, right, that you mentioned before.
Correct. Yeah.
And then obviously answering the questions, if people have created the framework. Again, we aligned very much on this side with the EU Act. So every time we use AI, so we highlight that to you. You can also ask the AI to answer those questions, right? So you can ask those questions. Again, it gives you where that is being provided, and then you can use the suggestion as well. You can ask for all the questions as well, to be done all together. And then if you define which one is your device, in this case, it's the dressings, so it's mentioning the dressings as well. So then it will be the information in here. So you have all the answers, suggestions, and it gives you obviously that information straight away. For example, this is the actual device. So in the INDRF, OMDR, and so on, what we believe is, again, is in defining the questions and defining the context. That's the most important thing for the expert, right? Because once that you have very well defined that, it can answer these questions very accurately. Obviously, you need to validate the answers, whether it's the same use, the same intended use. So obviously, it gives you the answers based on that. Or AI as well, if it cannot find the answer, it will tell you cannot find the answer. So we are very strict with that if there is no evidence in there, we don't provide that specific information. One thing that is very well used, and I can go to another item, is to extract tables, right? So if we have, for example, in terms of the endpoints, or create a table with the summary. So we have, for example, this is for the PICOs, this is the PDF, but you can ask the specific, AI here to create a table based on that PDF. And obviously this takes a lot of time to produce, but in here you can produce this very quickly, and then you can verify that information following the specific citation. So those are the specific use cases where obviously accelerates much more the process. But you mentioned as well, Katharina, like when you answer, of course, I think that this is a huge advantage. I believe there will be more and more automations by putting checkpoints with the expert to verify the information. So it's more verified, but just being able to answer all these questions straight away and giving you the context while that information is provided. So you can see here, it says no, because they are mentioned natrox, topical oxygen, and it's not the same device, right? So as we define the context, it just gives you obviously that information straight away. One of the things that you mentioned as well to us, Katharina, is creating tables, which we can create as well those tables using the AI, but then translating into databases as well. Is something that it helps you very much. So there, obviously the AI is amazing because it can just extract the information much faster, especially when you give a context. And when you do one, obviously it feels the value, but when you do 50 and 100, you feel fully accelerated from it.
Yeah, right. And I think especially with the development of clinical evaluations under the MDR, I think most of these documents have much more tables than we used to have under MDD. So I think under MDD, we often had very narrative clinical evaluations, not with so much focus on really quantitative performance and safety data. Now in our clinical evaluations, we have usually lots of tables. So it really saves a lot of time when you don't have to create them on your own.
Right, because especially in that function, and you mentioned as well traceability as well, that, you know, understanding from which query is coming and so on. But then that function, you said you have all the tables that you created in just one place with all the data and you can export it. That is helping you, right, in terms of doing less admin to gather all these different type of steps, or you need to filter, for example, different type of articles based on those specific parameters. So these are automations that you mentioned before that, or to understand the duplicates, right, by clicking here, is helping you a lot to accelerate, and that's not required AI, but as well it's accelerating you a lot, right, in that context.
I agree.
And then obviously from our perspective as well, like once that you have obviously all these articles, one important thing in terms of like traceability that you mentioned before is, and we want to finish with this before we open with questions, is obviously you gather all of them in the reference manager, then you can have full traceability in which systematic review is being used, what are the files. So if I click in here, I will be able to see in which articles or which systematic reviews they've been used as well. So in terms of obviously there are a lot of functionalities here. You can use the AI chat as well, to extract information. Again, it's at a speed that no human can do that, especially when we talk about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 times and 100. One thing I wanted to ask you, like obviously you share from your perspective what is helping you more to be to accelerate those processes. What do you think is the balance in terms of like keeping in control plus acceleration, right? And where do you feel the AI is helping you most right now?
Yeah, I think on the one hand, of course, in the screening process, there you only have to pay attention that you don't overly rely on the AI suggestions. So I also sometimes do when I have many hits that I have to screen, then of course you tend to rely more on the AI suggestions in the end when you're maybe already a bit tired. So just keep in mind that you're still the one in charge for the actual decisions. And yeah, I think in terms of time, definitely all the tables creation, I think for me that saves most of the time in the whole SLR process.
So especially like those automations and the starting writing or the extraction is where you feel obviously that as well, like there will be more amazing features, from our side, because we're gonna release some AI features to draft a report based on the relevant items, and as well the analysis that the expert has said, yeah, this is correct. So obviously based on those checkpoints as well on our side. So we have 5 minutes, so we are happy to take any questions. One question I wanted to ask Antonella, because Antonella speaks with a lot of teams, supports a lot of teams, is what do you think are the main challenges, and as well what people give back to you in terms of what they really like about the AI features and accelerating them as well in that process?
Sure. So first of all, thank you both, because I think you really do covered very well the challenges and the opportunities, right, of the AI that can get through the process. And as I work and work with a lot of manufacturers and teams that are performing the literature searches, I really can see also your point of the process as the first place that needs to be taken into consideration to then automate and really accelerate the process with the AI, right? So I really like that part. And I do see that the challenges, as Katharina as well was highlighting as well, sometimes they're hidden in between the automations and the AI as well. The challenge can be sometimes really in also validating and confirming the information. So having a fast way on any AI that you're using of keeping the traceability or the citations or having a traceability of the suggestions is super important. So that's also what I wanted to ask Katharina, if that is also part of how you can accelerate also the validation of the AI, and if from your side as well is something that is super important and like non-negotiable when you use AI or the automations as well, right?
Yeah, correct. And that's why I think it's so important that it's so easy to find the information where the AI got the answers from. So that makes it just much more faster to just briefly validate if it's correct or not.
And also one thing that I wanted to highlight and ask Katharina is that we see the return, of course, is the time, right? So you save time, you save manual work, but we do see a lot that the automation, the process, the whole infrastructure that you create with the technology can help with the quality, right, of the output.
Yeah.
Can help in keeping the process compliant in that way, and you can have a higher reproducibility, consistency, reproducibility as well of the process. So I can replicate, right, the process. Yeah. I can keep a better traceability of the decisions. And in highly regulated industries, like the ones we work with, this is super important. So how do you see as well this point of view of the quality, apart the time savings, right? That is, of course, the big thing there.
Yeah, I mean, I agree 100%. I think one nice example are really these repetitive literature reviews that you do, for example, for your post-market surveillance activities. So when I did this manually in the past, you always had this issue. You have this one time frame, then you have the next time frame, you have to repeat the search, then you have to manually detect the duplicates, have to make sure that you have exactly the same search strings and whatever. And so now you can just automate the process, get your new results. The duplicates are already at the site, and then you can just focus on the main results that you have to screen for your activities.
Yeah, so instead of having everything, spread across Excel sheets or different folders, right? You can, it's really like more audit trail in that sense as well, right?
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, okay. I think we can see if we have any questions as well from the audience. At the moment, I don't see any questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat or in the Q&A.
If there are no questions, obviously everything is very clear and everybody uses in the same approach, which it would be great as well, because what we see as well from our side is a lot of wishful thinking as well, like clicking a button, like just have everything ready, and so on. So what we see as well, once that you have created the infrastructure and the software, obviously you can do a lot of automations and AI. And what's the next step for us is to start creating those AI agents that they are going to draft those reports based on the validated answers as well and outcomes as well. So it's like a work of brick by brick in order to build the whole infrastructure. But it requires different layers of checkpoints, and as well, in terms of like what Antonella said before is to have compliant process, because then eventually you need to show this across the for auditors, for your company, but as well, ultimately to the patients,
Absolutely.
I think there is a question from Conrad.
Yeah, we have one question. Yeah. How does the system retrieve original literature, and does it also serve as a literature management system? So
Yes, so our system, it does that. So we have a library in terms of like reference manager, and we have a citation manager as well that is linked to Microsoft Word. And that's the idea as well, to have everything in a compliance ecosystem, because everything is 27001 within our ecosystem. So then you can have from the literature searches, the results of those articles and link together to the reference manager. So you keep all the evidence in the same place connected. And that's the challenge for many teams. And even more, because we are not covering this in this webinar, you can link all those outcomes to specific products and product families or technical documentation within our system as well.
Will regulators accept AI-assisted CRs?
Yes, of course, it's happening already. So that's why we are covering this, especially if you have the checkpoints where you validate every answer and you have control over the process. So a lot of obviously is used with AI, but obviously if you have in a compliant process where the companies, the professionals, they check the output, as Katharina shared as well, they validate the answers and so on. So then, yes, this is already accepted. We have many companies putting CERs across. So we didn't mention before, we will have more than 150 companies using MedBoard right now.
Yeah, and I think as you just mentioned, I mean, it's just important that you somehow document this in your process, right? That you're using AI and how you use it. And then, of course, yeah, then it's accepted.
Great. So I think we arrived to the 1 hour. So thank you so much, Katharina. It's always a pleasure having you as well, like you sharing your knowledge, your expertise as well as you deal with this, and you are very well respected in the industry. So thank you so much for being with us. Thank
It was
you,
a pleasure.
Antonella,
Thank you too.
as well for us. I hope there is a new one very soon as well, when we have some new features that will accelerate even more. But our message as well is, first, you need a very good data structure. Second, obviously, you need a process that is already structured. You can accelerate a lot with AI, but then you need experts like Katharina, or internally you have, as well, to actually understand the intent and to make those regulatory decisions, as we cover in the presentation. So from our side, thank you so much. I think that there will be some recordings and slides. So, any question, follow-up questions to Katharina, to ourselves, very happy to help as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Goodbye.